Welcome to our show, AdAstra With. Today, we have the great privilege of having Janeya Griffin on the show for great conversation spanning the transformation of the new space industry, perspectives on leadership, career growth, team building, and how new space is handling issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Janeya is a STEM graduate from an HBCU, and that's a historically black college or university, who contracted with NASA for 8.5 years, specializing in technology transfer.
Wow.
Today, she's an active leader at that's four, everybody, different organizations, all focused on bridging gaps between society and excluded communities. One such organization is the Equity Space Alliance, where she is the founder, chair, and CEO. At ESA, Equity Space Alliance, their mission is to advocate, educate, and facilitate equitable ownership within the space industry. They're not solely working to diversify the space industry workforce, but are working to position and prepare the next generation of space entrepreneurs, researchers, and businesses from underserved communities.
Wow. Incredible, Janeya. Really powerful stuff.
Love that mission.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming. So
yeah,
super excited about today.
We have so much to dig into and think this is just such a powerful arena to discuss. And it's going to be really awesome to hear the different perspectives that you have on these topics. Quick introduction of Brian and myself for those of you who don't yet know us. My career in talent acquisition has spanned consulting, managing, hiring for legacy organizations and startups. And now I get to express my passions, my love for people and building thriving teams as founder and CEO of AdAstra, where we do headhunting for executive and highly technical roles for NewSpace and Clean Tech industries. In other words, we find you the people you need to change the world. And I also am a student pilot, which is relevant for...
Just did your first solo
that's
recently.
That's right.
Very excited.
Yeah.
From the recording of this episode, at least.
Yeah,
So.
I can now land and take off a plane on my own. Very specific plane, very specific circumstances, but I can do it.
And do it well.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then my background's in engineering, so I'm the nerdy space guy of the bunch here, I think. Or maybe we're all space nerds, but
Yeah, just don't label me as a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
I did
Not
work,
my forte.
I did work on rocket engines for a bit at SpaceX for spanning nearly 7 years, and then worked at a drone startup in the Bay Area before starting AdAstra with my wife and business partner Seyka here at the table, and I'm now our COO and CTO. So anyway, that's just a little bit about us. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, Janeya, you got your bachelor's degree in forensic chemistry and criminal justice. And 12 years later, you got a master's in space leadership at business and policy. So tell a little bit about that path and help us connect those two areas of education on your journey.
Ooh. It's a long journey,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so originally I got my 2 bachelors, so criminal justice and chemistry with a concentration in forensic science from the Grambling State University. Go Grand Fam. And that is a historically black college university. Once I graduated, I ended up actually going to Cal State University San Bernardino.
Yeah.
And they had a certificate program. It was called the Integrated Technology Transfer Network. So that's where this whole like tech transfer commercialization thing came from.
Yep.
And it took STEM students from HBCUs, and then it taught us the business side of things. So we could speak the technical languages. So I would essentially like, hey, scientists, all you speak is technical terms, and you don't really talk about like the benefits or the features that business people, that's their value proposition, right?
Yeah.
And so I would take that and then be able to translate that into that value proposition and put it in marketing terms and different things like that. And basically sell your idea out of your head. So
Wow.
I decided that is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like, this is really great because essentially my passion is to establish connections. So solving problems, connecting the dots, connecting people, just, making connections with things. And so I was able to do that with technology transfer because I could take a idea or some sort of concept and then find an alternative use for it in a completely different industry than what it was
Yeah.
created for.
That is so fun.
So when I learned about NASA and just the federal labs in general, so there's over 350 federal laboratories that all do
350?
tech. Yeah.
Wow.
They all
Wow.
do tech transfer. There's like 14,000 patents that are all available for licensing by companies. And I found out this and I was just like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, how do I sign up? And then I ended up getting a job at NASA. And people always ask me like, oh, well, how did you get a job at NASA? And I'm like, I applied online. How you
The
do any other
internet.
job? Yeah. And so it was really great. I basically, because it was a very new office, I was able to see things all the way from cradle to
Wow.
grave. So I learned everything, how to build out a tech transfer office, how to change the culture, how to, just so many different things. I was actually the one who was negotiating the licensing terms. I was drafting the license agreements alongside our patent attorneys and even, applying for patents. And so just learned just the gamut of everything around tech transfer. And then in that instance, I want to say, I don't know when I started, but for about 4.5 of those 8.5 years, I was at the Federal Laboratory Consortium, which is those 350 labs all coming together, do best practices, talk about, different policies and things like that. And so I was on their executive board for about 4 years. And then I started a committee called, we focused on bridging the gap and really bringing together minority-owned businesses and then federal labs so that they could work with them. And then out of that, everything kind of just kept going. And I was just like, okay, people just don't know anything about tech transfer or commercialization or intellectual property, specifically people who look like me, or in communities that don't really have a lot of resources. And so then I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm going to educate people about all of the resources that NASA has, that federal labs have, that are just out there for them, for the taking, so that they can get into, a tech-based business or a tech-enabled company by utilizing the intellectual property that's, at these federal labs. So I did that for a number of years. And then I started my own consulting firm called The Commercializer, which really was a moniker at first.
Yeah.
And then I started getting people like, hey, do you speak and do you consult? And I'm like, you know what? Let me put an LLC on this so I can not be, taking the money myself. I can write off some things. And then kind of just, developed. Now I have a business model around it. Now I work with HBCUs to help them set up their tech transfer offices, go into the different communities, teach them about intellectual property and commercialization, just a lot of different things like that. So now I left NASA and decided that I just wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur. So I really hunkered down on the commercializer. I had another venture called Concreates, or a creative agency that's powered by the incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and really just started focusing on working in those areas. And then I was doing a contract with Baylor College of Medicine and their TRISH program, the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And they wanted to essentially get more people of color involved in the solicitations that we're doing. So they are a consortium of MIT, Baylor, and Caltech.
Yeah.
And so they get funding from NASA. I like to say to fund the riskier things that NASA's interested in, but they're like, listen, we don't have time for that. So go out and find somebody that's non-traditional, that, is really thinking outside of the box, and let's put some money behind it and see what comes out of that. And so we did a study, a mixed method study, where we interviewed people and we did we had an instrument survey. where we kind of just asked them, like, why aren't you applying to the solicitation? Do you not know about it? Like, how do you want to be marketed to? Like, how do we reach these types of populations? And so that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Our recommendations came from that, helped them to actually establish their diversity
So cool.
program now. And that's been going really great for them. Seeing, them posting all types of things. They put a new solicitation out to get more marketing and stuff. But in that, and this is a very long-winded answer, I'm sorry, because this is a lot.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
But in that, I was doing research, right? Yeah. And I came across this report, which I cannot find for the life of me today.
I hate when
and
that
it
happens.
was 100 faces on the cover of this report, and it said the new space economy. And I said, oh, this is great. But there was not one person of color on the report.
Oh
Whoa.
my God.
Not Asian,
Not so
not
great.
Indian, not Black, not just no melanin.
And you're
Oh
going,
And I'm like,
who said okay to
100?
publishing this?
how is this? Like, there was astronauts on there. I was like, we have Black astronauts. Like, we have, you can't say that you can't find anybody because, I just don't
Wow.
understand. And
Oh
so
my
for me, I was
goodness.
just like, a new economy is being created
Yeah.
and people of color are not involved in the development of it. Not just a conversation, but the development of what that looks like. And so I was like, okay, no, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Like, this can't happen.
Yeah.
So like I really pivoted and started to divert a lot of my effort and energy into bringing awareness to what the new space economy is. And that's really how like Equity Space Alliance came to be. But really it was about increasing diversity in space at first.
Yeah.
And then as I started having conversations with some aerospace leaders, every time I brought up the term diversity, they would say, oh, we have a, employee resource group, or we,
Mhm.
have internships with, or we hire, people from HBCUs. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I want to talk about like, equity. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
profit. Oh, profit sharing. Yeah, no, we don't do much of that, right? And so I said, okay, well, instead of it being called, increasing diversity in space, now we're going to increase equity in space because I think that's what is needed and what's important. So,
Wow. Could you define equity in this context for everybody?
yeah, so I think people get it mixed up because they always want to equate equality with equity.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
think they're two completely different things.
Okay.
And what I like to give is a metaphor. And I forget the lady's name. I always forget her name, which is so bad. But she came up with this metaphor. And it was around, a party, right? And so like diversity is, inviting somebody to the party, but inclusion is asking them to dance when they get there. But like equity, and then I think, for her metaphor, she said like, oh, they get to pick the music or they get to pick the song that they dance to. But I'm like, well, no, I'm going to take it a step further. Equity means like they were on the committee that actually put the party together because it's their party.
Right.
So they get to decide who's invited,
Right.
what type of music is being played, what type of food are we serving, where is it going to be
Yeah.
located, And so
Involved in the
I think,
decision-making.
yeah. But when you get equity and equality is like it's a level playing field, and people are getting the same type of opportunities. But in equity is like, okay, well, yes, I have the same opportunities, but does that mean I have the same access to resources? Does that mean I have the same access to capital and, whatever other type of support that you may need in order to play at the same level or at the same experience, on that level playing field, right? And so I think a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, it's everybody has equal access to opportunities, but when we talk about equity, there's no ownership,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so like there needs to be equity and diversity and equity and inclusion, equity and accessibility. So if you're talking about having diverse candidates, do they have the opportunity or the power and the authority to make decisions without having to ask for permission?
Yeah.
Are you giving them access to a budget that they have, freedom over to say, oh, I want to give money over here without having to ask for permission?
Right.
So it's really an ownership thing that I think of. And I think even with, what happened with George Floyd and, the uprising and all these things that were taking place, we really are in a time where we're fighting for ownership and for equity, and not to just be included, but to be given a piece to say, this is yours, do with it what you want, and here's some support to help you do that.
Yeah. So two of the things that are showing up for me in ways that like positions that you would have ownership, and that is either having your own business, right? So going to VCs and getting the funding on similar footing to people of other demographics, right? Which we have some stats that we'll talk about later about that being a big area of opportunity. And then another that shows up, right, having a budget, having the authority to make decisions and ownership would be like senior leadership in organizations. What else am I missing? Where are some other areas that show up of ways where we can be assigning that equity and that ownership?
I think also it's about, giving people a voice who don't necessarily have it all the time.
Yeah.
And so even if so you mentioned senior leadership, right? And that's great. Not everybody is going to get to a senior leadership position, which is fine. And not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, which is also okay, right? But there are ways for them to have equity or for them to feel safe in a space in which they are frequenting all the time, where they're actually, investing their time, their money, all of their effort is going into helping other businesses be built. And sometimes people are okay with that, right? But you give them equity because you give them choices and you understand what it is that they're wanting. So if we're talking about like employee resource groups, what are you guys wanting to see happen? What are you wanting to see done? And then making sure that they have the support and the resources and the budget in order to get that done, versus just saying like, oh, well, until you get to a leadership position or a senior level position, you won't have any authority. You won't have any say as to what happens. Culture is made up of people. And if those people don't have a voice, then they don't feel safe. They don't feel welcome, right? They don't feel a sense of belonging, which I think is really extremely important when you are building out these cultures and making sure that they're not only diverse, inclusive, equitable, and accessible, but, they need to feel like that they belong in this. And so that piece of equity in there is allowing them to say, hey, I would like to see this done, and then it happening.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Very, very good. We're going to dig into this more as we go on. I want to ask a couple of questions about how you've grown your career.
I promise it won't be long.
No. That's not what I meant at all. I just meant I don't want to take attention away from such a valuable and important topic that we're talking about. And I also, you're a powerhouse. And people want to know how you do what you do. And so I just wanted to be clear that I'm redirecting us slightly, but we're coming back. We're coming back. Okay. So we said in your intro, like you're at the helm of 4 companies right now, right? Like you are leading big missions, you are doing big things. And how do you manage all of that work and produce quality results with competing priorities?
A team.
Yeah.
That's it. I can't do it by myself.
Yeah.
I refuse to do it by myself. I think I had to get there though.
Yeah. It's hard.
I had to fall a couple times, had to stumble. I had to, this is not going how I expected it to go, to, have that light bulb come on. And even outside of a team, having a tribe, right? Having people who are just as capable as you, sometimes even more capable than you, but having them there to inspire and motivate you and advocate for you, champion you in certain areas, I think that that's important. So mentorship is really something that has been pivotal in my life, as well as, just making sure I have the right people and the right team around me. And then, one thing I did have to learn is sometimes it's not just about the people on your team, but how you have the capacity to lead them.
Yeah.
Right. And taking accountability as a team versus pointing the finger and saying, oh, well, you messed up and this is your fault. But it's just like there's so many different things that led up to that point. And so as a leader, taking that step back and saying, okay, what are your strengths and how do we position you to really utilize those strengths and, be put in these areas so where you can really succeed.
Yeah.
Versus, because I get people that work with me and then have worked with me, and sometimes like they fall short. And so I'm like, okay, this isn't working. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I had to learn to like take a step back and say, okay, is this the best place for this person to be in?
Yeah.
Because they're coming to me and they're super excited to work with me. And so they're going to say yes to everything that I ask. It doesn't matter what I'm asking, even if they don't know how to do it. Yep, I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? And so I'm like, I need you to help me help you.
Yep.
Right? And I don't need you to say, if you can't do it, tell me no.
Yep.
And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I need you to tell me no. And so, let's get to a place where it's like, okay, I will have not just more respect, but be in a better position to be like, okay, let's figure out something different. Or if we need to go get somebody else who does know how to do this, then let's do that. But I need you to tell me that. Otherwise, like we're just spinning our wheels and we're consistently having these conversations that really is not getting us anywhere as a team.
Yes.
Right. And so I had to learn that, but I think that was really one of the most critical things that has really helped me a lot, because now I'm able to step back and say, okay, you're not a project manager, so I should not be asking you to manage projects, but you're really great with policy. So like, let's put you over there and then let me go out and find a project manager. And now I'm not like, because I feel like you need every piece or person that is on your team to really move things forward. And so like, if I am, I always like to say like, everyone is an expert in their own field.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, I may be able to do these things, right? Or I can figure it out. But if I don't have to, then like then I shouldn't. Right. And so
Be
if I
smart
know
with your
I do
time.
commercialization, like I don't want to do project management. Like let me get somebody else, right? I don't want to have to design my website or do graphics and social media. Let me just find somebody else who like that's all they do and they do it really well and they do it very efficiently, right?
Yep.
So that we can get things kind of rolled out. So yeah.
Speaking of these teams, and I agree, by the way, like building teams and also finding out what motivates and what is energizing to your teammates is so valuable. And then also telling them over and over and over again, you can tell me, please tell me no, right? Please, right? I want you to be direct. We want to, so valuable. What is your strategy for building teams?
Ooh, that's a good question. I really think it does come down to just energy.
Yeah.
Right. And how you vibe with people, because, resumes, you can you can put a lot on a resume.
Might not be true.
Technically,
Right.
I was, an engineer.
Right.
But like for plumbing or for, sanitation, a sanitation engineer, right? Like, oh no, you're a janitor.
Yeah.
Right. But one thing I will say is that I think it's just really just how do you vibe? Like, what is your work ethic? And then like in the face of chaos, how do you handle these situations?
Yeah.
Like, are you just like, oh my gosh, we're on fire?
Right.
Like, or are you like, okay, we're on fire.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out.
Yep.
Right. And so I'm more of that person that's just like, we're on fire. Somebody has to put the fire out.
Yep.
So like, let's figure out what this looks like. And obviously I might not always be like that. Sometimes I'm just like, woo, we on fire. And
Yeah.
but I'm looking to my teammate to say, we're on fire. Let's figure out what that looks like.
Yep.
If I'm the one that's just like, I can't move, I don't know what, so really looking at like, do they have like not necessarily the opposites, but like, do they fill in the gaps
Yeah.
of the places and the areas in which I'm weak or in which I need support in?
Yeah.
Right. And then vice versa, right? Are there areas where they may have gaps where I can also fill in for them? And I always look at it as like a mutually beneficial relationship versus a like, you work for me and like I've just never been that person because I have this theory or this belief of like, if we can't be neighbors, what are we doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
like,
That's
if you
really
can't
good.
buy the same thing as me, what are we doing?
right. And you said earlier that a big part of who you are, like your soul's calling, if you will, is like connecting, right? It's like providing value in two directions. You're like,
Yep.
hey, I know how you can connect to create synergy, if you will.
Yeah.
So it sounds, I'm hearing you also that echo in your team building, right? You're like, I want to provide value both ways. This isn't just money for work, it's we're adding to each other.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is sometimes you just have to fill people out.
Yeah.
You never know a person. I mean,
Yeah.
we're constantly evolving.
Yes.
Like I'm not the same Janeya that I
And
was.
how much can you get in the
at
interview
12 o'clock when I
process?
walked in here.
Right.
Right. And so I think it's just really important that, you try people out. I always like to say be someone's first yes, because if I'm already kind of like, no, I don't want to work with this person and not giving them a try, like what if that person was doing that to me? What if it was me? And I'm like, I'm trying to break into the industry or I'm trying to, get to this position. And so if I could just be somebody's first yes, I'm always looking to do that.
That's so good.
And then sometimes, it may not work out, right? But it worked the way it was supposed to work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. That's really good. And I think that I don't know how to classify this type of person, but people who are high performers who have gone through a lot of mistakes or challenges and figured out how to, learn from those and really face those demons. There's a lot of mentorship capacity, right? So I'm picturing that you have a lot of mentorship capacity. So you interact with people and you have the opportunity to be their first yes, and then to pour life into them, right?
Yeah.
You're pouring training and love and life and yes into them where they may not have gotten that before. And like, what a magnificent way to grow teammates that are supposed to be your teammates. And it's not always going to work.
Yeah.
But when it does, it's good.
Yeah. It's really good too. And then you just feel like this sense of calm, right? Because the anxiety leaves, like the stress leaves because that it's not just you and you're like, oh no, they got my back.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if like your missions are aligning.
Yep.
That
Right.
trust
And so
is
I
built
think
up.
that's really important, especially when you're building teams, is that, you guys you have the same passion or, the end goal, the outcome
Yes.
is the same, right? They're envisioning it the same with you. And I think that that's important. Or even just, along the way, like, right? You might not come with me all the way to the end, but like your stop is like 3 stops before my stop. Come on, get on this train.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think that's important.
It's so true that those aligned goals, aligned vision. A good friend of ours, Zach White, he also has a engineering coaching program. She does lifestyle engineering, so works with both kind of the professional and personal development of engineers. Anyway, he posts really great stuff, and he posted recently on LinkedIn about if you want to have massive success and like flow in your work, not thinking about a job as a job, but thinking about it as a calling and as like you are the business owner, right? And it's exactly what you are talking about right now, where you're going, if we can find harmony on the path that we're on and we're aiming towards the same goal, now we're like, that's where you truly get that team, right? We're marching together, we've got each other's backs, and there's something really magical about that.
Yeah, I would
Really
definitely
magical about
agree.
that. Yep. Very cool. What would you say? is your leadership philosophy?
Ooh, my leadership philosophy. See, my professor is gonna give me. I just went through this and I'm like, do I want to say?
Yeah.
So my leadership philosophy. I think it's important to like lead by doing.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
like if I'm sitting here and I'm like, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not something that I would ever do, like,
Yeah.
no, I need to be able to roll up my sleeves and, I can take out the trash. Everything that somebody is willing to do, specifically when it comes to something that I'm building, right? If I'm building this and this is my, my baby, then I need to be able and be open to doing everything. And I think that when people see that, then they're more like they want to help more.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, you can do this. And it's not like a,
Right.
oh, I'm bigger than you and or better than you, or because I pay your bills,
Right.
X, Y, and Z. So I never want to be like that. And I think, having that to where I'm saying, if you're having an issue, that means like we're having an issue.
Yeah.
And so like, what can I do to help us?
Yeah.
Right? Help me help you.
Yeah.
Help us.
Yeah. That's so good. As a high performer juggling so much, any hacks or practices that you do to keep your mind and body in this high energy productive state?
Ooh. Okay, so remember when I was like, you fall along the way?
Yeah.
I think that, okay, so here's a little story because it might be lengthy.
Yeah.
So right before COVID, so this was like 2020, us going into 2020. Right before that, I testified to Congress around diversity and patents. And so I was like on this high, it was great. Like, all right, we're about to get into, policy, advocating and stuff like that. And then COVID hit, and then we had to be confined to our homes. So right before then, I was kind of already on the fine line of like, oh, do I want to get into entrepreneurship or do I want to, stay at NASA and, get into a different or new program there and, kind of just stay there a little bit longer. And so I prayed about it and I was like, all right, God, I want to be put in a position to where I have so many contracts coming in for commercializer and for, everything else that I'm doing that I have to pick. I cannot do both.
Yeah.
Right. And then COVID happened. And so then we were sent home. We were working remote. And I was like, oh, I could do this. Right.
Yeah.
And God was like, no, that's not what you asked for. So I had gotten these contracts and they were coming in, but I was bringing more people onto the team so that everything could be managed. And so it got to the point where now I'm not at NASA anymore, right? And because our contract ended.
Yeah.
And then so now I'm like, okay, well, I have to go full-time entrepreneur. Don't want to work for anybody ever again. Like, let's figure out what that looks like. There was that one that I think it was like around the Christmas holidays, right? And so everybody's shutting down. And so now I'm like, oh, I can get a lot of work done during this time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try. You know what? Let me take a couple days off, right? So I stopped working, but I can't stop working.
I get it.
I don't know how to not work.
Yeah.
Because like my everyday has been like balancing. I'm calling people. I'm having meetings. Like my calendar is so full that I don't know how to turn it off until I was just like, okay, let me try to like, I just started binging something and I left my computer in the office. I left everything in the office, my phone included. And I was just like, all right, I'm just going to sit here with my show and I'm going to watch my show. And so then as I started to like, okay, I'm chilling now, I'm relaxing. Let me, go get a massage.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that, right? Let me go for a walk. All right, let's go for a walk. So then when the new year starts back up, now everybody's like, oh, we have all these meetings. Like, let's go. And I was like, whoa, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, there's like, it just went back to how it was. And I was like, nope. Told my assistant, listen, I need 3 meetings per day. If we need to push it out far in advance, we're going to have to do that, because I don't even know how I was managing
Yeah.
before, because I wasn't doing self-care.
Yeah.
I wasn't, just resting,
Yeah.
right? I wasn't unplugging or whatever, right? And so now I've really started to do that more. But going back to the whole COVID thing, we're locked up in our homes now, and I developed eczema.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've never had eczema in my life,
Wow.
ever. And so when I talk to the doctor, they're like, oh, it's stress-induced eczema. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not going outside. I was just work. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, it's physically affecting me.
Yeah.
So I have to do something.
The body will find a way to raise a flag and make you
Yeah.
make you slow down,
Yeah.
even if you really
and so
don't
I'm
want
just,
to.
I guess I would say, like, my recommendation to people, or my tip, is to sometimes just, I had to really start, like, now what I do is I actually schedule naps.
Yeah.
Like, I will schedule nap. DJ will tell you. I'll say though, oh, I can't meet at that time because I have a nap. And he's like, what? And I'm like, no, I'm so serious.
That's awesome.
Self-care.
And so
Yeah.
I really take a nap. And
Yeah.
so now people that work with me, they're like, so have you had your nap today? And I'll be like, oh, no, but it's scheduled for this
Yeah.
time.
How
and
long's
they
your
know.
nap?
So it just depends, right?
Yeah.
Typically it's like 30 minutes
Yeah.
because, I will put it on my schedule for like 45, because it take me 15 minutes to like
Yeah.
decompress, like chill, and then I want an actual 30-minute snooze.
Yeah.
I think that's what they recommend too. Like 20, 30 minutes.
So I really started like getting into like the science behind it, and like, oh, I don't want to wake up out of my REM, right?
Right.
So my REM is 30 minutes or it's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I have like all these like tech gadgets and like
Yes.
That's so cool.
yeah, so it just tracks my sleep, tracks like, oh, okay, you've been active this long, and you're in the red, so don't do anything else. You need to sleep, you need to rest. So I really started doing that and investing in things like that. Investing in I have this thing called a Muse. So I wear it, it's like a headband, and it kind of like tracks your brain activity,
Oh, cool.
but it teaches you how to meditate. So like the guess like when you go to, or when you're meditating, there's a storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so the storm will be like raging if your mind is not calm.
Wow.
So it teaches you how to calm the storm, and then like how to clear your mind.
So are you?
So
So you
cool.
have this band on, and then are you like walk? Like how do you?
No, you
look
hear
after.
it. You hear it. Yeah. You hear it because it's like in an app or whatever. So you can say like, oh, I want to pick this, or I
Wow.
want to do that. And so if the storm is like going, like, you need to just
We're gonna need
empty
you to
your mind.
write a blog about
Yeah.
Yeah,
these
right?
habits and
That's
put all the
so
links in there.
cool.
And
yeah, Muse, holla at your girl, advertising.
Yeah, right. I know that's awesome. That's really cool.
But no, so those are some of the things that I've done, is really like, we buy stuff all the time. Like, so I need to really start investing in me. And
Yeah.
so like there's so many different apps out there. They have like these rings that like
Yeah.
track
Yep.
all your, different, things going on with your body. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to spend money on all this other stuff. I might as well,
Yeah.
spend money on this. So I look at it as an investment.
That's
but
really cool.
yeah.
Really great. Yeah, and the longevity of that energy,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not just about high energy today, being able to sustain that so that we can really carry out these missions that we're targeting. So awesome. I have so many other questions that I want to dig into with you, but I also don't want to miss digging in deep to talking about ESA. So we'll see if I have time to get into some of the other fun things of how you are. But let's dive into talking more specifically about equity inclusion in NewSpace.
Yeah, I think first off, I'd love to. I mean, we already mostly defined diversity, equity, inclusion. That metaphor really awesome. I've heard it as DEI, EDI.
Yeah.
Heard justice and the J get thrown into it, so we have a nice little
B
Jedi.
B gets thrown in,
Yeah.
belonging.
Okay, great. So let's hear your opinion. What would you call it? What is the best way to properly communicate the goal of this? broad
Um,
but powerful topic.
Yeah, I think what's important, and I don't want to say I don't love all of the new acronyms.
Because on one hand, it's semantics, but on the
You
other hand,
know,
semantics matter.
I think it does, but sometimes I feel like it takes away from like
Sure.
the actual goal of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
If I have to learn a new like
Yeah.
label and and not to say that they aren't important, right? Because
Right.
you have to know what to call it. You have to be able to identify it and acknowledge it. But I think a lot of time is spent on trying to rename
Yeah.
versus that time and that energy and that effort being spent on actually solving the problem.
Yeah.
Love it.
And so, we've adopted EDI, right?
EDI,
Because
okay.
obviously we're centering equity.
Yeah.
But like if I go to somebody and I'm talking about ED&I, like that could mean completely different, thing. And so it's really like, what type of conversations are you having? What are the programs and initiatives that you're putting forth? And, I think we get so caught up in what we're calling it because like we're on these panels and these podcasts and like you
Yeah.
have to talk about it and all these different things. But honestly, sometimes it's confusing. And then when
Yeah.
you have people who aren't readily in the industry or who aren't knowledgeable about, the new labels, like when BIPOC came out, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, and who gave you the authority to rename, like, or to label, or to like,
Yeah.
but why? So now, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, BIPOC, and honestly, like, I'm just not even.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones DJs like, don't say that.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
But I think overall, it just takes away from like
Yeah.
the real goal, right? And it's cute. Like, let's name it.
Yeah.
Jedi. Heard
Jedi is catchy.
It's
so,
dope, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Right?
kind of hard
Because
not to
like
be
you
on
have,
Team Jedi.
especially in space,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
like, who doesn't love
Yeah.
like Star Wars and
Yeah.
Star Trek and all the just
Yeah.
So it's great. It's cute, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a play on words, right? But what are we really doing?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
with the space industry, it's an industry has a very long history of being very far from diverse. So like Hidden Figures was a great movie and it did a great job of shining a light on this issue, but that was in the 60s. So have things gotten any better today? Are new space organizations doing any better of a job at this than legacy organizations? What are your thoughts about how far we've come or not come?
So, okay. So two things. So one,
It's a big question.
Hidden Figures is now. We're talking about what happened in the 60s
Yeah.
now, right?
Right.
Which I mean
Little bit of a
typically
delay.
happens, right?
Right.
But like it's almost embarrassing because like that's the first thing that we go to, or really like typically the only thing that we go to when we
Yeah.
talk about space and like DE&I and it's Hidden Figures, which is like came out like a couple years ago. Like, is there nothing else that we can
Yeah.
reference?
Totally.
Right. And so I think that really speaks volumes. The other thing that I will say is when Hidden Figures did come out and I was asked to go on speak, and I had this like, you want me to speak about that? Like, I don't know if I'm the person to do that, because I felt like I've never, I don't want to say never, but in my career at NASA, I don't think I've ever had to experience that.
Okay.
Mm,
And I think because of what those women went through
yeah.
in that time, during that time, allowed me to be able to have that position where I am now, and to also say that I've never had to experience that, right?
Yeah.
They went through the things they went through, so I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And so I think there's always two sides, right? So yes, it was great, but where are we now when like the only thing that we have to talk about is Hidden Figures, which happened a long time ago, but they just now did the movie. So I think, we're going in the right direction, but like, let's not give people cookies and, applaud them where, when they should have been doing this in the first place. Right.
Yeah.
So I think like, how do we start to normalize like things like this to where it's not like we have to have this conversation? Like I really have this goal where I'm like, no more firsts.
Yeah.
Like if we're still talking about first in 2030, 2040 to like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That's
so really great. And then are you finding that the organizations that existed in the 60s, and frankly, there's a lot more change they have to go through over that amount of time versus the organizations that have started more recently and part of the NewSpace like generation and wave, is there much difference between these issues in those different organizations, or are they in pretty similar places?
I won't say they're in similar places. What I will say is that because, there's a lot of different laws that happen. You have the civil rights, you have like all, affirmative action, like all of these things that started to happen that have really paved the way for not just Black people, but all races and ethnicities. And what I think we're seeing now is the people who were putting things into policy or, requirements and qualifications are phasing out. And so a lot of the new startups are with, people who don't have that same kind of like thought process. So there's a lot. And then you have cancel culture, which, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, whole other show about that.
Yeah, but what I think, there's bad and then there's good. There's always, the balance, right? Good and evil, right? But what I think happens is people are so afraid of being canceled that they want to do the right thing now. They're like, nope, I have to because I don't want to do this, which kind of sucks because it's just like, oh, the only reason why you're doing this is because like of your own, right? And so, but what I will say is that I think a lot of the organizations that are coming on board now are led by people like you and I, and so like we have, these goals, we have the historical evidence that has happened, and we're like, we don't want to see that again. And so we're now stepping into our own authority and power and saying, we're not going to let that happen.
Very cool.
Yeah. That's huge.
I was on your website, on ESA's website, and saw some projections of equity in the space industry for the coming decades. Can you share some of those numbers? And I'm assuming a lot of other people will be quite alarmed by them.
Yeah. So that was actually one of the main reasons outside of that report that I found once I started doing more digging. And like we know that, there's a disparity that exists with people of color in STEM. But when you dig down and you kind of get to that level of space, it's like non-existent, right? And so not to the point where like there's nobody that's there, but it's just the disparity is much larger. And so, one of the things that I really started to look into is like, well, why? Right? Like, what does this look like if there are new economies that are being built, but there are these numbers, these projections, and so.
Can you share some of those too?
So the projections are that by 2053, the wealth of an average Black family's home will be zero by 2053. And then for Latinos, 2073. So their wealth is like zero. So it's like the median wealth, right? And so how is that possible when there's a whole new economy being built?
Yeah.
Right? Because that it just means that we're not in it. We're not in the development of it. We're not a part of that conversation or the building of that economy. And so, yes, the wealth may be attributed to, real estate, different things like that. But ownership and entrepreneurship are a big part of that, specifically when you have people who are being put in prison, right? So Black people are 5 times more likely to go to prison. And it's just, it's insane, right? 1 in 3 people, right, have a criminal record. And so I think people don't really understand or equate that there are all these small things that tend to add up that really contribute to that. So it may not just be one area where, hey, yeah, we don't really have a lot of ownership in real estate, but why is that? Right? Because maybe a lot of, our families are broken because the person who's actually making the money is locked up in jail, or the person who's taking care of the family is locked up in jail. And so I think, that's one of the things that we're really doing, is trying to bridge that gap also with this new economy that's being built. So
Yeah. This is not a simple problem, but is there a way to distill, or what do you see as some of the primary root cause issues that lead to these numbers and projections?
One, I think it's a lack of knowledge or education, right? And you can say this across the board in any industry, right? So there's lack of access to capital, right? Education, any type of support or anything like that. And so, that's where we get to the whole like equality versus equity thing. If people, it doesn't matter how much money we give people sometimes. If they don't have the education or the knowledge of application of it, right? Because we can give them, we can say, hey, you have access to all these courses and these schools, and then you have access to capital. But if I don't know how to apply it, that makes no sense. It doesn't matter, right? And then there's the extra caveat of, if I don't think I belong, it doesn't matter what you tell me, right? I can yell until I'm blue in the face. We need to get into the space industry. We need to start buying real estate. We need to do all these different things that's going to help us build wealth. But if people don't believe it's for them, they will never do it.
Yeah, so good. And talking about access to capital, I forget which quarter, it was either Q3 or Q4 of last year, and I believe it was that Black founders raised less than 1% of the total capital raised, and that's just so disproportionately terrible. And so that, I think, leads to the question of, okay, maybe there's equality, but it's not equitable. And so is there not access to this funding, or is it because they're coming to the table, they didn't have the resources to be successful and they're not getting funded? Like, what is the, like, that has to change. And what do we see there?
So I will say systemic oppression.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't really understand what that means.
Yeah.
But there are, I've had to have very difficult conversations with people, because some people are like, they didn't believe in, slavery and 400 years of oppression and all this stuff. And I'm like, let's talk about the 13th Amendment. Let's talk about redlining. Let's talk about, all these different things that are still in effect today. Right. And so, it just, there's a
Makes
lot
your
of
blood
stuff.
boil there.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that I want to say that I will refrain from saying. But what I feel is necessary is, we don't want to, specifically around space, right? We don't want to go to another planet and still be begging for diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
Like, if we're still doing the same thing that we were, still fighting the same battles, right, that we were, like, what are we really doing, right?
Yeah.
What are we investing in? How are we getting people to become a part of not just the conversation, but the development of what that is? How do they have ownership and equity? How do they say, hey, we want to build X, Y, and Z? Because essentially, we are building for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody builds for them. And so if you... I have this theory called the proximity effect, right? You are not, when you're not directly affected by something, you don't really know how to move. You don't know how to position it. You don't know how to play it. And so that's why it's so important to not just have people at the table, right, as placeholders or as a check in the box, but to really get their insights and then give them the resources that they need to make the moves that they need to make, because they're the ones that are experiencing it, right? I can't say like that I have, a disability. So I don't know anything about, well, not that I don't know anything, but like I can't speak for people who are in the disabled community because I'm an able-bodied person. And so I don't know like how these different things show up. And so the best thing for me to do is to go to that community and say, how can I help? How can I give what you need or give your voice a platform, right? And support you in the way that you need to be supported versus coming in and saying, oh, there seems to be a problem here. Let me own that problem and be the solution for that.
Right.
Because that's what we see happening a lot, right? And so it's just like, oh, but by the way, I'm going to get money for the problem that you're experiencing, for this solution that I'm bringing. And then I'm going to ask you to be a part of helping me bring that solution, but you don't have any ownership in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how do we change that? So I think with what we do and our partners, that is one of the main things that we talk about is like, we need to have equity. We need to have ownership. And so if you're not about that, then you're just not our people. And that's okay.
Yeah. Right.
It's a lot of people. We can find our people.
and having a seat at the table to make those decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you'll remember this story better than me, but what was it, the first time that we put a female astronaut into space? How many tampons were brought up with her?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that conversation.
Like, this
oh
is
my
just
gosh.
a silly,
Right.
It was so
horrible
bad.
It
thing.
was for like 1 month. They sent her with like 10 boxes or something
I
like
think
that.
it was like 100. Oh, just give her 100. Like,
Yeah, and you're
just
like-
some arbitrary number. When it's just like,
You didn't have a woman you could talk to about that? You just need one that she would know, right?
a seat at the table, some
call your
person
daughter
at
and
the
ask
table.
her.
Right.
Call your wife, your
Yeah.
mom, your grandma, like your auntie, somebody.
Yeah.
Somebody call
Yeah.
them and just be like, hey, so, we got this going on and I don't know who else to call, but like how many,
Right.
And there must have been some fear to ask because you
No.
don't just send
No.
up.
No.
You,
I'm
not-
I refuse to believe that there was a fear to ask because like
sure.
it just you just have there's this energy or this aura where it's just like I know what I'm talking about. This bravado,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Like to where it's just like, what am I going to ask for? I just give her 100. That should be fine.
Yeah. It's just so wild
know?
with the cost per ounce to space.
Yeah,
And I just don't understand how that could have happened, and it's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Which is why it's really important that you
Yeah.
have, like
Right.
I said, people who are in proximity to whatever that challenge or that issue is to
Yeah.
really ask them, like, how should we be doing this? Or even give them
Right.
the ball.
Right.
And be like, hey,
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
what else do you need?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this isn't my area,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That's
I mean, maybe they're afraid.
Yeah.
Maybe,
and
but I
that's-
just
And even
like,
if
ooh,
that is not
periods.
well, and that's not an excuse. Like that is the stakes are too high. This is too
Yeah.
important for even if that were the case for that to be the
yeah.
response.
Yeah. Yeah. So, from our perspective, we are hiring for space companies
Mhm.
and clean tech companies, and we are having the conversations all the time, seeking diversity to get diversity of thought, diversity of perspective.
Yeah.
Right? We want that. And as you mentioned, like getting people into the industry is like that's a whole
Mhm.
project. What can we be doing? What can NewSpace startups be doing? How can we help earlier on than just going, okay, we'd like to hire now, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can we be doing that's going to be supporting the solutions for 5 years from now so that we can really help further what your mission is with getting equity in space?
Yeah, shameless plug. Contact Equity Space
Yeah,
Alliance.
yeah.
All about it.
And like
Yeah.
who should contact Equity Space
Yeah.
Alliance, and if they want to help, if they want to be involved, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
So I think our biggest thing right now is just being able to provide people with like what their space strategy is.
Yeah.
In communities who have been historically excluded.
Yeah.
Right. And so our thing is always go to where they are.
Yeah.
right? And so if you don't necessarily have, I always like to say that one Black friend.
Yeah.
But if you don't have, proximity,
Yeah.
right, to, some of the people who can help you or who can give a voice to actually what's happening, right, and what's going on, then, you can reach out to us. And even if it's not something that, we may directly be able to help with, our networks are so vast. Like, we're both, we both went to HBCUs, and we both graduated. We both have our masters now from Thunderbird. And so I think, just our networks are just super big, super huge. And so if you need help, if it's not us, then it's somebody in our network or somebody in our network who knows somebody else, you know? And I really think it takes a village. And so not being afraid, right? Or having that fear to say, we don't know, right? And acknowledging that there is a challenge or an opportunity, right? That they need to be, taking advantage of, I think is the first step. And then, start internally. Like, typically you have the people that you need to be able to go and talk to, hunt them down, find out like, okay, who do we have that's in-house? And then if you don't have anybody that's in-house, then, go out and try to find somebody. But even if you do, let's just say you have, because typically what we've seen is there are, some organizations have chief diversity officers. Some of them do not have a position for that, but they have a group within their company that's working on these issues, that's very passionate about it, but maybe doesn't have a budget for it. Or, they may have a budget for it, but they don't have a team that's helping to support them. And so, one of the biggest things is, not to be performative.
Right.
And so if you have a group that's working towards this, that wants to work towards it, then give them the resources that they need. Give them that budget. Give them that team. I know sometimes with finances and different things, you may not be able to afford a whole team. So then that's when you come to the Equity Space Alive. And we can, subsidize essentially that team for you. We can be your external team that can go out and help that internal person or that internal group really bring to fruition what they're trying to see, because, we have connections with brands and just different, organizations that can really help this message. So I think it really just depends, like, what are some of the things that they're facing? And sometimes they may not know. So, we can come in, we can say, hey, let's assess what's going on. Let's see, let's take inventory of what you have. And maybe where there are opportunities for you to have other things or have more.
Wow, that was so great. You packed a lot of really useful information into that. So let me summarize and then correct and fix it as I go. Okay, so NewSpace startups who are interested in getting a more diverse community and really want to bring that in, a great place to start would be to use their inside resources, build like a group that has the goal of bringing more diversity in and giving the people who are already there the ownership to move forward their mission. And then, and not only create a group and be like, you can talk about things you like, but actually say, here's a budget, like, we care about this, we're going to move this forward. And for companies who are not that size yet or don't exactly know how to set their goals or what are some good initiatives, they can contact ESA to help guide them along that path. Is that
correct?
Okay.
And what I will also add is the group that they're giving kind of like access and authority to, we can also help them.
Amazing.
So they may have ideas that they want to see, out in the space. We can say, hey, let's amplify with our connections and what we're doing, and maybe even some projects to say like, hey, we're already doing these. If you guys want to be on board with that, then they can also contribute as well. Or if there's things that they want to see, then we can kind of make that happen.
So great. Wow, what an incredible resource. That's super valuable.
Incredible. Awesome. I have another one or two for you. So I think it was this past year or so, the Space Workforce 2030 initiative came out. What are your thoughts on that initiative?
One, I need to fix my facial expression.
that might have said it all.
No.
And can you share a little bit about it for our audience?
So the Space Workforce Pledge by 2030,
Yep.
right? So they, I think they, and I'm not a part of this at all, but they were announced at Space Symposium last year, I want to say, and really got a lot of the senior level leadership at these space companies to actually sign on board and say that to commit to actually making their teams more diverse. They're going to be sharing their numbers annually, which is great. The caveat here is that is really just focused on workforce.
Mhm.
And
it's
so
more of a diversity,
yeah,
non-equity type.
correct.
solution.
And so
Okay.
I think, it's great. It's wonderful. It's a great, first step in the right direction. Obviously, there's always things that, that can
Be better.
happen, right?
Yeah.
There's more opportunity,
Sure.
right? And so I think in understanding, where we're at now is a great first step. But I think we can do more.
Cool. And then for a lot of companies that say they care about this, what is something that you often see that's maybe a counterproductive solution or a pitfall of, we care about this, so let's try this, but it maybe works in the opposite direction? Is there anything like that you see commonly that you would advise?
Counterproductive.
Like, is talking about diversity counterproductive if the real goal is equity? Is there anything that comes to mind, or is kind of anything, as long as there's the right effort and intentionality behind it, productive?
I mean, counterproductive is being performative.
Yeah.
Essentially. So if you're going to really commit to being equitable, being diverse, being inclusive, being accessible, being, having belonging, then put a budget behind it. Put real resources behind it. Don't be performative and just, look.
Yeah.
We have a new chief diversity officer, or we have,
Yeah.
I think what really needs to happen is, and for some, it may be because they just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
so this is a new space for them, because, what happened in the 60s is still happening a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're
So-
going to talk the talk, you got to be ready to walk the walk
Yeah,
with
and
it.
I think it's important because there's so many, people that we've talked to, that we've heard from, that, there's still no progress being made, because you'll say oh, hey, yeah, we're inclusive, and we want to be more diverse, and so hey, here's a group, and we're going to put you guys together, and we're going to give you a little bit of a budget. And then when you say, hey, we need a little bit more money to be able to do X, Y, and Z, they're like, but why? We just gave you, that should be enough.
Mhm.
But if you've never done it before, right, then
Yeah.
how do you know what is enough, right? If you're not actually impacted by it, that proximity effect, how do you know what is enough?
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot, because not only do you have to just reach out to people, it is in building pipelines and communities, right? Because essentially what tends to happen is you have somebody who is doing their job, and then they're doing the work around diversity, right? So they have multiple jobs in which they have to do, which is they're going to mentor people, right? They're going to put on, projects and programs. They may already have a nonprofit that's working towards this. So now they have another side job, right, to their original job that they
Yeah.
have. And it's really they're just doing this job so that they can fund the side job.
Yeah.
Really, because the side job is the one that's really impacting the community,
Yeah.
right? And really getting us to where we need to be in order to solve some of these problems. But if they would just sit down and ask individually, each of their employees, like, what do you really want to do? And how can we as a collective or as an organization help you in that manner? Like they may be able to fund the nonprofit that their employee is working on, and it's not a conflict of interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that also helps the culture, right? That also helps them wanting to the retention, right? Because you can recruit all day, but are you retaining them?
Right.
Yeah.
Are they staying, or are they leaving after 3 months because it's toxic?
Yeah.
Right? Like how do we stop that from happening? So I think, the counterproductive part is we just recruit. We say, oh, we're going to get this many people in, and this is a number that we're going to reach.
Yeah.
But what are the strategies and the goals and the programs and the projects that you have in place and the
Yeah.
policies that you have in place to retain?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's going to be the game changer. We won't need to continue to recruit if you have retention.
Yeah.
So
That's
great.
really, really good. That's really good. Well, we're over time. I feel like we could talk for many more hours. You
I
are
know.
so fun to talk to, and you've got such
Likewise.
great insights. So thank you so much for being on the show with us, Janeya.
Yeah, I really
Really.
appreciate having
Thank
you
you
here.
for having me.
Yeah. For the listeners, thank you so much for listening to AdAstra with Janeya Griffin, where you can hear directly from leaders in aerospace and clean tech. On this show, we love to have leaders share their behind-the-scenes knowledge from their industry experience, learn about the strategies that bring them success, and discuss controversial technical topics. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.